China's working on its Made in China 2025 push.
The US is playing with fire, but China has fire too.
Global economic powerhouse.
Young Chinese people are becoming disillusioned with everyday life.
China has mobile payment,
cashless.
a cashless society. All use QR codes.
China. People think I don't like China. I love China.
Hi everyone, welcome back to China What's the Future, and today's guest is Matthew Brennan. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So
in this wonderful room with this
this amazing neon
sign. Yeah.
Thank you.
Funky.
So Matthew, I'm a big fan of yours. I read your LinkedIn post almost all the time, and I believe you are somewhat of a celebrity in the kind of China marketing tech industry. I think you have almost 40,000 followers on LinkedIn. It's approaching 40,000, right? Congratulations. And I guess for the benefit of our listeners, you are also the founder of China Channel, and you guys organize probably one of the largest WeChat conferences in the world. I went to the one in Shanghai last year. It was really useful. I learned a lot of things that I didn't even know that I could learn about WeChat. It was amazing. So it's highly recommended if anyone is interested to learn more about WeChat. There's more. You also co-host a podcast with TechNode, which I have been a subscriber of. And if that's not enough, guys, you also wrote a book on the WeChat story of WeChat.
Yeah, I'm writing it. It's not
you're
yet.
writing it
It's
as you go.
yet.
It's not out yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know when it might be out?
Well, I want to get it with one of the big publishers. So my original idea was to self-publish.
Ooh.
But now I'm thinking I should be more ambitious.
Yeah.
But the thing about the big publishers is they're very slow.
Yeah.
I'm learning as I go along. So I'm a first-time author. Which means, they need to take a risk on me. But I think the topic of WeChat is big enough.
It's big, yeah.
That it has got global appeal.
It's in English, the book?
Oh, sure. Yeah. The book's for an international audience.
Great.
And I've been working on it for about a year and a half at least now.
Wow.
Because it's a history of Tencent, it's a history of WeChat. It goes all the way back to the 90s.
Wow. So there'll be some inside scoop.
There is definitely some stuff in there that
Controversial stuff?
Tencent probably doesn't want people to, I don't think there's any secrets, but I think there's certainly stuff that a lot of things that people don't know outside China, and maybe people don't know who aren't industry and in that world, they might be surprised.
It's great. Sounds like a great book.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but like I say, it's not finished yet, so
Awesome.
I'm a slow writer.
When do you think you'll finish it? Because obviously it'll take a while before it's published.
That's
even
what
after you
I'm. That's
finish
what
it,
I'm
right?
just saying there. Like, all I've been told is when you've got the deal, from signing that deal, you still have to wait another year.
Oh wow.
After signing that contract, you normally,
Sure.
and like I say, I'm going through this process for the first time, so I'm learning.
Okay.
But people have told me that, so. Maybe I could release parts of it early, like have a snippet or something. And if I don't get the deal, then I will self-publish, and that will be much faster. So
I think you have a big enough audience to.
Yeah,
get
I mean,
interest anyway.
certainly, yeah. It's a niche. It really is. Like, China marketing, when in the grand scale of things, is a niche. When we talk about the book world, but this particular title is more accessible, I think, because it's. The closest thing to it is the book by Duncan Clark about the story of Alibaba, the house that Jack built. And if you've read that
I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet.
It's quite a good book, and really that's the closest thing to this in terms of like it's more accessible in terms of it's not about marketing.
Sure.
It's about how did WeChat become this mega super app and take over China, and like who are the people behind it, what were the challenges that they had.
Sounds interesting. Maybe we can get back here on the show once you finish the book and talk a bit more about it.
Yeah.
Sounds fantastic. So before we start, we always ask this question to our guests who come on the show, because I guess China was closed for a very long time, right? So it's only been opened recently in the last kind of like couple of decades. So it's always very interesting to hear people's China story. It adds another layer of complexity on top of their kind of expertise and their area, niche knowledge area. So maybe you could tell our listeners what your China story is.
Okay. give you the short version because I've been in China for at least 15 years now. And I came originally from university here in the UK. I studied economics at Southampton, and then with a friend of mine, we both went to China to originally teach for a year. We just basically, I didn't want to get a job in the city here quite yet. I wanted to just chill out for a year and do something completely different. And so China was completely different back then. So I did that. Then I stayed to learn Chinese. Then I stayed to open some businesses with friends and become an entrepreneur, basically. And we franchised the school chain. I went up to places like Inner Mongolia, where I lived for 2 years, and then opened English language training schools there. That was crazy times. That was around the time of the Olympics, 2008, and really wild west of China. And I learned a lot there. And we eventually sold those schools later on. I went to work in the head office of that company, an American education chain of about 100 locations all across China, and did their R&D division. And so I spent about 4 years in Chongqing, in central China, one of my favorite places in China. Actually, if you get a chance to go to Chongqing,
I've never been.
Amazing.
I love spicy food, so
yeah, very spicy food, but an awesome, very messy place. And I was running a research and development team there for many years, and we were producing all kinds of educational materials, so online learning courses. We did our own app. We did a whole series of books. So actually, I'm already an author, technically, because my name's on a whole series of children's books that are used by hundreds of thousands, well, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of students on a yearly basis.
Wow.
In China. And towards the end of that was when WeChat was taking off. And I remember distinctly going into a 7-Eleven convenience store, and the first time that I actually used WeChat to buy something, and I was just blown away. I was like, this is going to totally change China. I just bought something with my phone. And back then, I think that felt super futuristic.
Yeah.
And it did change China. And at the same time, that was the beginning of mobile payments and cashless revolution. And also official accounts were really that was still quite early for official accounts. Late 2014.
14, yeah.
And early 2015. I think it was definitely around that time. And
which is not even that long ago in the grander scheme of things.
Right.
It's
yeah.
crazy how fast things change.
WeChat marketing isn't that old when you think about it. It's WeChat official accounts started in 2012. They only really started to kick off in 2013. And here we are, 2019 now. They seem, in terms of China marketing, to be old school almost.
Yeah.
Like they're one of the oldest platforms along with Weibo, right? And there's all these new platforms come up in this time. So things do go quite fast. Very quickly, yeah. But when you look at it in number of years, actually, it's not that long ago, right? So, yeah, from there, I was just super inspired and said, okay, I want to go into this area, and started my own company, went off to Beijing and Shanghai, and for me, I'd always been in tier 2 cities. I'd always been in places like Chongqing, Chengdu, Dalian up in the northeast, Shandong province, and places like that. So we went into the big cities, and that was a big jump for me. But definitely the right choice. Haven't looked back since. WeChat has just had this amazing journey. And I'm continue to learn, continue to evolve my knowledge and where we are today and what we do. The conference you mentioned has been fantastic for us. I think that's been a big success, and I hope every year it's a leap of faith when you do it that people will actually come. And
it's like hosting a party. You never know until the last minute.
Totally. I mean, event business, I think, is very stressful.
Yeah.
And we only do one a year, and I have no plans to do any more because
I can imagine.
It's I think a stressful business, and I'm not very well suited to it. You need to be very, very organized, and I don't consider myself to be a super organized person. I'm more sort of like, I love doing research, but I'm not sort of a person who can schedule things down very well and follow up with people. Like I need people to help me with that. Fortunately, I have a great event manager who does that. But even so, I think
Still stressful, right?
yeah. It is. I feel.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned kind of like your first time of paying for something with WeChat, and it's kind of like such a surprise. I remember when it first happened to me, it was much later actually, because I grew up in London, and when I went back to China, when WeChat started to pick up traction and you could use mobile payments, I remember paying for something because China was always a cash economy, and you must remember when you first went there, you couldn't really pay for anything with anything other than cash. Everyone had cards, but no one was really using them. People was using cash all the time. So to go from that to mobile wallets was like a huge step, and I always say it's like a leapfrog of technology, of like way of life. And I remember distinctly actually trying to pay for something. This was very recently, so very kind of like different to your experience. Trying to pay for my taxi with cash, just I think it was March of this year, and the guy just didn't accept the cash. I had like a 100 yuan note, and that's not much money in China these days. For our listeners, it's about £8, and I couldn't pay for my taxi with cash. And the guy was just, you know what? Don't worry about it. Just pay for your taxi later. With your friend's account, because I could only pay using Alipay in one of my co-workers, and he trusted me enough. It wasn't much money given the situation, but he trusted me enough to pay for the taxi journey with kind of Alipay later. And I always thought that's a positive. Kind of almost technology has created this circle where people are even more trusting of each other. And I feel like, and then you see kind of the other side where a lot of the kind of, I guess, older generation who can't use WeChat, you must have seen that video online of that person being refused cash in a shop. That created a whole kind of like viral thing. So it's a very interesting time when disruption can cause such a stir, both positively and negatively in society. And I think I'm somewhat envious of you living in China at this point in time. I think it's a very interesting point.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing is still playing out. I mean, it's still playing out because what mobile payments did was it gave a foot in the door to digitalize the offline. So what I mean by that is when people are paying with their phones for everything, it means everyone has their phone open in the store. And then as a brand, that means you have a really strong channel then, a chance to now take them to follow your WeChat account, or follow your Alipay account, or get them to use some kind of coupon or share something socially. It's so much easier in China to do all that stuff than it is in the UK market, because everyone has their phone open when they're in the store at some point, and so you can push things to them, and then we see that today with new retail or smart retail, whatever you want to call it. China's really far ahead now, and that Chinese businesses, brands are digitalizing faster. And I think a big part of it is because the entire payments part of the chain of this customer journey is digitalized. So it makes it easy to go online, switch online, offline.
It's almost like they're the same world. Like, because in the West, like offline, online still feel very separate. It feels like they're separate worlds, right? But in China, people don't understand the extremity of O2O. People call it offline to online, online to offline in China. And unless you experience it, you can't really imagine it from like your sofa in Yorkshire or whatever, right?
Yeah, there's just a lot more talk about it. If you read media in China, the way that people talk about technology is different. It's quite clear they have a different mindset. They're much more comfortable. They refer to, offline traffic, right? They just think of foot traffic being the same as clicks and views on a website. They don't see any difference between it. It's all just ways to get to a purchase. It's all just a conversion funnel. And so the way they speak about it and think about it is, it's quite different from what you see in Europe. And it's actually that's how I think about it more and more, is that there's really not much difference between having someone physically in your store and having someone on your website, and the things you can do, and they just think about it like in terms of how much does it cost to get someone in my store, how much does it cost to get someone on my website, right? Like, and they're just running arbitrage between these two prices, and they're just two different channels, and I don't care which one they go in. It's just working out the conversions.
And I think this it kind of leads nicely onto the next topic, which actually, before I do that, I think it might be a benefit to our listeners to just quickly, I think most of, if not all of our listeners already know what WeChat is. We jumped into the details quite a lot there, but just very briefly. So WeChat, I think, now has over 1 billion monthly active users. It's absolutely massive. Just very quickly, it's a combination, I guess, I'm trying to compare to kind of Western platforms, probably a combination of WhatsApp, Facebook with e-commerce, payment, live streaming, and all kind of rolled, and of course kind of like apps all rolled into one platform. A lot of times I like to refer it as kind of like almost like an operating system, like a social OS, right? You have everything under one roof, especially with the kind of addition of mini apps. With the you on Androids, I believe you can even drag your mini apps onto your kind of like OS desktop, which means you can access it outside of WeChat. I've thought a lot about this over the past couple of, especially with a lot of new features that have been released over the past couple of months, and I think so. Operating system is I'm a geek, so I got into computers when it was like Windows 3.1. Before that was MS-DOS, and the concept of operating system hasn't really evolved since then, since Windows 3.1, and everything else around it has evolved. So do you I think WeChat, we're seeing almost kind of like a preview of the future of a connected OS model, almost like a Chrome OS, but much more successful, with much bigger traction. People are doing everything that they need to do online on this one platform, this one kind of connected operating system. I guess a question then, Matthew, is what do you think is the future of WeChat, and where do you think they're trying to take this kind of like ecosystem, this web of services towards? I know they're pushing kind of mini programs a lot. What do you think, Matthew?
The future?
The future of WeChat.
Yeah, I think mini programs is still got a long way to go. I think we're still in the relatively early innings of adoption and experimentation of what's possible with this framework. Yeah. And if you really think about the implications of that, the success of that format, you're seeing that the businesses are more and more on board with this, idea that a mini program is better than a website, that it has lots of advantages, and there's possibilities are almost endless. So that's got implications that are continuing to play out, and I think WeChat really wants to sort of step back and just say, we are operating system, like we want to be more and more like iOS, we want to be more and more like Android. And so iOS and Android, it's actually, it's amazing that you've got this platform and people build on it, but the actual platform stays pretty stable. Yeah. Right? It's not okay, you have different upgrades to Android, but they're very incremental, right? If you're a platform, you don't want to suddenly change things too much, right?
Because you need to be stable traction, yeah.
Yeah, well, because you're this garden where you're trying to nurture this ecosystem, and people are building things, all different kinds of things on top of you. You can't shift things too much, sure. And you'll end up it will have unintended consequences. When you look at Tencent as a company, what they're focusing on, they're having big changes. They're shifting everything into this new B2B direction, this new sort of cloud computing and offering B2B services. And then, the WeChat growth in the consumer side has been absolutely amazing over the past 8 years that WeChat's been around. But all of the consumer-facing stuff, everyone knows that's slowing down, that it's become mature. And so we can't expect this like crazy growth that we've had over the past 8 years to continue. Even though there's still plenty of growth to be had in lower tier cities, and that's still relatively okay. But it's sort of the high growth in the future is going to be coming from businesses, different verticals, digitalizing. So whether that's education or healthcare or retail or finance, there's still a lot of adoption of SaaS services, for example, is much higher in, say, a market like the UK or in the States than it is in China today. So there's a big gap there. That is rapidly closing, actually, because it's just been pushed by the government so hard. It's been, all the Alibaba and Tencent and Huawei and all of the big guys are like, now they're going full steam ahead with like selling cloud services, trying to digitalize.
It's almost like the AWS model, right?
Yeah. But it's also about how do we, take an industry, how do we optimize all of these different industries, and it's very much linked with the government's drive to be a leader in AI as well, right?
Yeah.
That in order to do that, you need to get data. You need to have data about what's going on in the economy. So if you just look at something like healthcare, for example, in China, the healthcare is pretty. It's got a reputation for being bad. It's like it's understaffed, and there's a lot of bottlenecks in terms of there's not enough doctors per people. AI can have huge effects in there, and it is already. When you can, in terms of diagnosis, of like radiologists and stuff, that an AI can do that much better than a human at a very low cost. So there's going to be big wins in all of these different industries. That's what Tencent's focused on. And then WeChat's role on that is to say, okay, well, WeChat's a touch point to the consumer, essentially. Everybody in China's on WeChat. So how do we allow these businesses to digitalize and then use WeChat as the touch point in order to reach the consumer better? So that's what they're thinking of.
And do you think they're doing that through mini programs to enable these companies to create their own digital version of their services or products, connect their customers better? Okay, that leads nicely on to the next question. I think a lot of our listeners are essentially Western brands looking to communicate and engage with Chinese audiences, and a lot of them see WeChat as a great gateway into doing that, and especially with kind of recently WeChat opening up the platform for foreign business to be able to register brand accounts themselves without having to go through a Chinese proxy. Do you have any tips for companies that are looking to do that are looking to onboard WeChat for the first time, whether it's kind of, I guess, through Moments ads or influencers or mini programs? What do you think are the best ways for them to start off?
Chinese brands that are doing best with WeChat, they're really integrating it deeply into their services as a tool to enable further digitalization and convenience for the user. Still today, WeChat's really not the same as Facebook, where it's not about newsfeed ads. If you're doing newsfeed ads on WeChat, you can do that, but that's really suitable for brand advertisers. So people who are looking not to convert directly, but Coca-Cola or whoever, like a very large organization that just wants to get out to as many people as possible. That Coca-Cola's the kind of just keep you in the picture, right, in their minds. So brand advertisers, that's great, but for smaller brands, you don't want to do it. You don't have that budget to do that, right? And it wouldn't lead to immediate conversion.
It's kind of like a drop in the ocean.
Yes. Yeah. So if you're looking for a faster, more immediate result to track that, like you would on a Facebook campaign, for example, then WeChat can't provide you with that today.
What about from a service? You talked earlier a bit about kind of WeChat being more of and I agree with you, it's kind of more of a utility service type of platform where you can connect your customers on a one-to-one basis at certain points of their journey. What about using mini programs to improve their service and connect with their customers better in China? Is that a good application? What do you think about kind of mini program for Western brands entering China?
It depends on the vertical, I guess, but you can look around that. There's so many different kinds of mini programs these days. So if you're looking at, for example, retail, Walmart's been very successful with that, with integrating them. I think all the big supermarket chains have integrated mini programs really well with this sort of scan and go system.
Okay.
That just allows them, people in their store to, rather than wait in a long queue, to actually just scan the items using their phone. And in China, everyone knows how to do that. Everyone's trained. They're very comfortable just scanning QR codes and barcodes. And so doing that and then paying on the mini program and then using that to from Walmart's perspective, now they can shove coupons or loyalty, or get obviously they're getting data about the user, which is very important for them. So it's got all these side benefits, which actually makes it better than the traditional way of just waiting in that queue and having the items scanned for you, and maybe paying with a credit card, or probably in China even WeChat Pay. But just the using that mini program is got many small advantages for them, and then for the user, for the actual customer, it's great. They want to save time.
Yeah,
so it's got a value. The value is saving time. So that's why people use it. So you've got to be very clear about what the value of your mini program.
Have you got any
to
other
your end
examples
customer.
of different industries kind of like really creating value with mini programs?
Just think about what you can do with an app, and a mini program can do 80% of what an app can do at 20% of the cost, roughly. Obviously, those are very ballpark figures, but it's so it allows you to, in the same way that you would think, okay, if we were going to build an app for our business, what would that be and what would that have? It's the same. It's very similar logic for WeChat. If you're looking at just e-commerce plays, there's a whole massive area of social e-commerce on WeChat rather. That's just been flourishing recently. You hear the big names like Pinduoduo, right? Like $25 billion company now that basically grew from WeChat traffic from mini programs. When you look back and you see they were one of the very, very early adopters of mini programs, Pinduoduo, and you look at their growth and you look at the rise of mini programs, they're correlated. And so that's like pure online e-commerce play. Those guys have, for those listeners who don't know, Pinduoduo is basically like a Groupon style social sharing in order group buying of products in order to get a lower price, targeted to lower tier users, mostly middle-aged women. And those guys have made probably the best use of social e-commerce, because mini programs, a big part of it is making e-commerce just much better, more fluid, more natural experience on WeChat. But you can see a lot of experimentation in this area. There's like community buying is a very hot area right now, where there's startups that have built out mini programs that allow there's a new model around e-commerce where within a housing community, so most Chinese live in a housing community, right, where it's like very high-rise tall blocks of flats. So someone within that housing community can actually they can organize their neighbors, their social circle around to like buy goods at very, very steep discount prices. Those goods are delivered to that one person, and then that final last mile delivery, that part, that could be quite costly, of like delivering it to all these other people, like 50 other people in that housing community. They handle that, and they'll take a small commission for that. And they will organize those groups, and they'll do sales as well. They'll, okay, if I can get 5 more people, everyone can get the price lower. So as long as it's in this housing community. This is a completely different model for e-commerce that we just don't see outside of China, really, to my knowledge. Maybe it's in other markets, but I haven't heard of it. And that's only really possible because of this. Mini programs makes that so easy. Before mini programs, doing that kind of thing, and all that e-commerce on WeChat, just the friction is just a bit too high. You see all these different social e-commerce models. Another example, if you're talking about a brand, Coffee Box rather. They did a great campaign with mini programs around social e-commerce based around creating your own virtual coffee store.
I think I remember this one.
Yeah, this one was really like innovative and in terms of and very successful in terms of like you could just create your own character, create your own store very easily within the mini program, and then share it on the newsfeed, share it in groups, and people actually can buy coffee from you. It's like your store, and you take a small cut. If anyone actually buys the coffee, you get some revenue. And so that's a great example of social e-commerce.
Yeah, social e-commerce is a very interesting subject, I think. So I kind of said briefly, we touched on it last episode, the fact that the the West is so behind on social commerce, and there's still it's still e-commerce within a social platform rather than a truly integrated social commerce experience. And I think with WeChat, with the kind of like with Weidian and now they've integrated a search function when you can directly search products that you can buy. Maybe you can explain to our listeners kind of like what WeChat is doing currently with social commerce and some of the new features that they're integrating.
Yeah, so recently I've been pushing this social recommendation newsfeed for products.
Yep.
So it's called Haowuquan, which is difficult to translate in English. It's just, think of it just as a stream of products that your friends have recommended. So I bought this and I think it's cool. Okay, maybe I'll recommend it to my friends. Whereas a newsfeed, you would expect it most to be content and articles and pictures of cats and gifts. Like this is just a newsfeed of like products. But it's all social recommendation and it's all manual social recommendation. There's no algorithm behind it. So it's just literally, you will only see what your friends actually put there. And so I don't know of any other feed like that. I think it's a new concept. And it seems that WeChat's, it makes a lot of sense because WeChat's got so many mini programs in it now. There's about 2 million of them. And actually, when you break that down, that's actually similar growth to the Apple App Store.
Yeah.
In terms of over that time. So that goes back to the point I made earlier of like mini programs have a long way to go still. When you think about the Apple App Store after 2 or 3 years and where it is today, right? There's a huge difference there, and so I think we'll see, we'll see that WeChat mini programs still has a long way to go. But yeah, back to the Haowuquan is basically there's so many mini programs now. Most brands have mini programs, and a lot of them have e-commerce mini programs, and people are buying things on them. And so that data actually, they're trying to aggregate that, right? Open that up so that we have a sort of centralized place where people can actually, they can take all these purchases and put them into a feed where people can use that to see what are people buying, right?
It's just true social commerce basically, and it's really interesting. I looked through some of my Haowuquan, and you do see things that you're like, oh, I can't believe this person just bought that, and I think it just adds another element to kind of like the social experience. And
yeah, I think it's very early days for it, and it might fail. We don't know, but it's quite clear that the team see this as important. They're iterating on it very fast, and compared to everything else right now. And from speaking to WeChat team people I know, I sense it is quite an important focus. But no guarantee that it's actually going to work. I think it's an experiment right now, but a very, very interesting one.
I mean, it sounds like so for me, it's almost like a win-win for both the users and the brands who are, or the shops who are selling the products, because the users get a better experience of even more kind of a community social element to the way that they use a platform. For the brands, gives them another opportunity to integrate, I guess, engagement with conversions at the end of the day. And I think this is maybe a good time to kind of like move on to a little bit more about, we talked briefly earlier about the future of WeChat, and I don't know if you heard recently that WhatsApp they have announced a lot more features that are very similar to what WeChat has been doing for the last kind of couple of years. I think one is Mark Zuckerberg announced last month or something that WhatsApp Pay is in the works, so they'll be starting doing payment. What I'm more interested in actually is WhatsApp announcing that they're going to start enabling brands to build business profiles and communicate with their consumers. I don't know if you heard about the kind of customer service thing where if your customers message you, you're able to respond within 24 hours. And very smart of WhatsApp is monetizing this, that if you don't respond within 24 hours, you can pay to then respond to that customer. So WeChat doesn't do that yet. And this is kind of like, we talk about how the one-on-one brand experience that has been happening in China for so long is moving on to WhatsApp now. What do you think? Do you think there are any other features for the benefit of our audience, our Western audience, that we are seeing now on WeChat that could potentially move on to Western platforms?
Sure. Well, what you described there is a good starting point, because one of the big values of for brands of WeChat is always commonly customer service. It's a great customer service channel, and because it's conversational in nature and you're messaging people,
Yeah.
and it's kind of obvious that you could also message companies, and people do that. And since the early days of Official Account, that's always been one of the big values. And I think they've been talking about doing that with WhatsApp for many years.
For a while,
actually.
yeah.
It's not the first time. Another big value is also CRM, that you can collect, WeChat CRM. There's lots of CRM platforms, social
Yeah.
CRM platforms.
And we're gonna
out
have like
there.
a whole episode, maybe even a whole series on WeChat CRM, probably.
Yeah, you could.
It's-
you could.
It's a huge.
It's one of the
subject.
core values of
Yeah.
for a brand of having a WeChat account is being able to. WeChat has so many APIs, and you can do some very interesting stuff there and extract a lot of very valuable data about your most loyal customers. So that, if going back to your earlier question about if a brand is wanting to look at WeChat, how should they look at it? I think that's also another big part of the equation of like why you would want to do this, is to build that CRM. So going back to Facebook and what they're doing, it seems like payments, they're not silly. They know exactly what's happening with WeChat for 6 years now with WeChat Pay. I don't think they're ignorant of the situation. I just feel Facebook as a company is focused on the advertisement model, and it's been very successful for them. And so they've been able for many years to have very high growth based around selling ads to businesses. They haven't really had too much pressure to explore other options like payments, like opening up WhatsApp to a variety of like business services and CRM. WhatsApp, if you look at the history of WhatsApp, the founders are kind of very much against working with businesses. They're sort of anti anything like that. They're obviously they've left now.
Yeah.
They've quite recently and on bad terms. And I do question whether they regret that decision to sell to Facebook. It seems they do, because they're actually very highly principled people, I believe. But that opens up the door for Mark Zuckerberg to do what he wants with it now, I think. And the potential is absolutely huge. It's obvious to anyone who knows what's happened not just on WeChat in China, but also for Line in Japan or KakaoTalk in South Korea. You look at any three of those platforms, and then you look at WhatsApp, you're gonna see, wow, there's just so much there that it could be doing.
Yeah.
And then you go to a place, I was in Brazil earlier this year, for example, and like everybody in Brazil is using WhatsApp like crazy, and businesses are on there, but they're all using personal accounts in order to achieve what they want. There's so much potential there, and there's so much money for Facebook to be making there. I feel there's a lot of value they could be adding that they're not. So it's kind of there's this huge gap there. In Facebook's defense, they are in so many markets that for them, to give the example of Brazil, where it's just so clear Brazil's a market of scale, where it should make sense for them to offer services, but they're not a Brazilian company. If they're going to go and move into payments, they're probably going to have to go and speak to Brazilian regulators and Brazilian banking, all the banks in Brazil. I'm not too sure how comfortable they would be doing that, and whether the regulators would want an American company to enter that space in their economy. So I think regulation is almost certainly a key reason why you have, why they haven't moved so fast in this area. What I'm more interested in recently is their announcement that they're going to do something called Globecoin. So Facebook's been talking about doing a crypto, perhaps a cryptocurrency. Yes, and again, it's something that there's been rumors of for quite some time. I think there's just such a huge opportunity there. They have to do something. I mean, if Facebook actually went into payments properly, it would be such a revolution, not to markets like the UK, but to people in the Philippines, the people in Indonesia, the people who are using Facebook all over the world, where the banking systems are terrible and most people are unbanked. but everybody's using Facebook products on a daily basis. You could actually, and these people are paying, like Western Union or whoever to wire money to relatives and paying like 5% in order to do that when they're poor people and don't have money, or don't have much money. And there must be a better system. And Facebook's one of the few companies that's well placed to actually really
have the
a huge
international footprint to be able to
Yeah, because
do
there's
that,
lots of fintech companies that that recognize this problem around the world and say, like, lots of people are unbanked, and we need to like solve this issue.
Yes.
And actually, it's the poorest people in the world who pay the most to transfer money.
Yeah, it's true. It's
The
true.
rich people, they've got lawyers and stuff, and they can avoid tax, and they don't pay fees. They can they're smart. They can work it all out, and they're educated. Whereas the uneducated people are the people who pay the most to transfer money from peer to peer often, and that's a sad state of affairs. Facebook has the distribution globally, and so that gives them a huge advantage and I think if they're able to crack it somehow with a crypto or whatever that they've got in mind, it would just have a huge value to so many economies around the world.
And I think that's actually what WeChat doesn't have the international footprint to be able to do that globally, but WeChat Pay has almost done that for China, what you were describing, right?
Yes, it has. So like for me to send money to anyone in China, it's free.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's instantaneous. And then if I go to other markets and people are using PayPal, for example, and it's like they take 4% or whatever when you do a business transaction, and you're like, my God, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It is getting better.
And for small businesses in China, when obviously everyone knows that literally everyone accepts WeChat Pay in China, right? So you go to like a street vendor who's selling an auntie who's selling vegetables, or someone who's making pancakes on the street. They can all accept WeChat, and it enables people and micro businesses the opportunity to be able to have, I guess, more freedom with the way that they accept payments from customers.
I think there's a consensus in Silicon Valley as well. I was there earlier this year speaking to people, ex-Facebook people, people from YC, and they recognize that the fact that in China, because the cut that the payment platforms take is like 0.6% typically, it's very low. And then in the States, you still got this credit card system where Visa and MasterCard are taking this big cut. Everyone, it really hampers startups and innovation in this space. And that's so they know what's happening in China. They can see all this flourishing innovation, but there's not, a big reason why it doesn't translate so well over into the US market is because everyone's still using credit cards, and you've got these big credit card fees.
Exactly.
And it cuts out, it just means that suddenly models that make sense in China don't make sense in the States.
We talk about this a lot. It's the legacy, it's the attachment to legacy technology and way of living that's kind of stopping the West from innovating as fast as China, who's kind of leapfrogging. And I think a lot of people, we say this a lot, that people are used to change. I mean, China's been growing at 10% year on year over the last 40 years. So people are used to kind of the speed of change. And when a new technology comes through, people are not holding on to kind of legacy technologies preciously as the West. And we always say, like, again, for our audience, China is a great testing bed for people to get a preview of what might be happening in the West in the future.
Yeah. I mean, again, there was a VC I was speaking to who said it, who crystallized it quite well. He said, like, if you want to like look at the people who adopt services first, it's actually typically Asian people and teenagers. Right? They're the groups that will adopt they'll form new habits and be the first adopters of new services and platforms. So examples of that, could be something like TikTok, right? So TikTok is popular with teens first. I believe that over time it will become a mainstream platform. Yeah. Today it's not in the West, but in China it already is.
I was going to say, you can only look at Douyin to see what happened, right? It started off with a very young audience, moved on to a more mature audience. Now you can get everything from business tips to cooking, whereas TikTok in the West is still basically young people dancing around their bedrooms.
Yeah, and it's to do with habits. Young people don't have any habits. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Like, they're starting from zero, right? And when they get their phone, everything's new, right? If you're 13 and you get your first phone, let's say, your first iPhone, like you don't know. You haven't got all these habits of, like, I use email for communication. I don't use I don't communicate for, I know, okay, I'm used to using a credit card. I know how to use that.
Yeah.
I don't really want to try this new thing. All of these habits, and even if you feel that you are a person who likes to try new things, unconsciously, it's going to be
You
like
have attachments,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, these attachments, these habits, and so that's really the key. And yeah, so going back to TikTok, yeah, in China, we've already seen that it started with a core demographic of young users, and it started about stupid videos and miming and mostly music. Actually, it's more about music. It was positioned as a music platform, not just because of Musical.ly, actually, but even in China, the original Douyin was the phrase is like 记录美好生活, like record your beautiful life is the tagline in China for Douyin, but at the original it wasn't that. It was something. It was about like the new music platform for young people was what the tagline was. So the positioning was completely different when it started, but it quickly transitioned because the format is very addictive. And I always say like TikTok or Douyin is like Twitter is to blogging, a TikTok is to YouTube, in terms of like it's just very, very short and just the best bit.
Yeah.
Right. So you can write a long blog post, or you can just tweet, okay, the sentence that matters.
Yeah.
Or you can watch a 5-minute YouTube video, and usually the first minute is the guy talking, and then the good bit happens here.
Yeah.
Right. So on TikTok, it's just okay. It's just that good bit.
And
Forget about the intro.
It's so amazing because I think anyway that it's almost the first platform where you almost rely 100% on AI to feed you information. It's not where you're browsing like a list of videos on YouTube or you're going through a feed.
Well,
you're relying on it.
YouTube is actually pretty algorithmic. People can go down the YouTube rabbit hole.
The
right?
rabbit hole. People talk about that a lot, and I get into it as well.
Because they do have very strong technology behind that.
It doesn't feel as addictive as... I mean, I use Douyin a lot, and I absolutely love it. But it just doesn't feel as... Maybe because you're right. Maybe because the videos are so long, you get drawn into one rather than scrolling through kind of like many. And you get a taste of doing that as well, right?
There's a combination of things happening. One is the length, and then the other, as like you say, is the AI.
Yeah.
And so actually, the founder of ByteDance very early on realized something. Because the logic there of like that it's a recommendation algorithm that's pushing everything to you rather than you selecting or clicking on something and say, I want to watch this. It's all just generated for you. And that logic of content being pushed to you rather than you subscribing to something where, on WeChat, it's completely different. You have to follow accounts in order to actually get that feed of information. Very on, they realized that with their original flagship product of Daily Headline, Toutiao, that in this sort of algorithmic curation of content is more powerful. That people are basically too lazy and don't have time.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's not lazy; they just don't have time, right? To seek out all these different sources of information and create them into their personalized feed. Media people would do that. If it's to do with your work, you'll do that. You'll take the time and you'll have.
But not for leisure.
Things.
It's a
but
lazy
most people
for
won't.
choice, right?
Yeah, most people, just would rather that the algorithm, just they open up this app and it's got this and that. Oh yeah, and it's kind of like it knows what you want to see even before you know it.
I know.
It's arguably does have some negatives, but I think for many people it's a more convenient way to get the content that they're interested in, whether that's video content for TikTok or whether it's just articles for Daily Headline.
I think I've got kind of like one final question, and we can talk all day, right, about kind of like ByteDance and Douyin and WeChat and how those two kind of affect you. We've touched briefly on WeChat CRM. But I think it's good because it gives an opportunity to maybe bring you back on the show in the future, talk about a specific subject, whether it's CRM. I know WeChat obviously launched WeChat Works recently as well, which is making a lot of noise. But just to kind of wrap up a little bit, maybe you can tell us what you think, again, kind of linking back in line with our podcast title, which is China, What's the Future, about China 2020 and what you think would be either the biggest habit changes with social media users, or maybe like the next big platform, or even developments with WeChat? Have you got any kind of like predictions, essentially?
Yeah, so in the China market, I think lots of people are talking about, okay, there's many hot topics. Everyone's talking about 5G.
Yeah.
And what impact 5G will have. Because what 5G essentially means is that the pipes are getting much bigger. So right now I don't know, like if I feel like I can stream video content in China pretty much if I'm on my data plan or if I'm on Wi-Fi. I don't feel too much difference these days. But having said that, when pipes get bigger, when we have more data, we end up filling those pipes always. But what we actually fill them with is not 100% clear right now. People have ideas, like, for example, in gaming, which I cover for Tencent, is the world's largest gaming company. Yeah. So I was at the Tencent conference talking to the gaming teams about that, and they're like, well, in the future now everyone's saying with 5G we're just gonna stream games, right? So course, you won't need to download apps. Well, you'll download a very small client, and
it's a thin client. Your phone acts as a thin client essentially that streams the games. The processing happens
in the cloud.
That's amazing. I think that's an absolute game changer. No pun intended.
Right. So we've kind of seen, okay, this is definitely a possibility. A lot of people are talking about, okay, well, with 5G, that kind of makes VR and AR a lot more possible.
Of course, yeah.
Right. That right now hungry. The equipment that if you want to use AR, the equipment that you have to put on, or certainly for VR, is clunky. You might need a high-powered PC in the corner. With 5G, maybe you don't need that anymore, and it can all be streamed. So that could have huge implications. Certainly, I've always felt that when you're talking about the future, the big technology that I'm super excited about is always AR, VR. I think that it's not going to come in 2020, but it will come in the next 5 years.
Better, yeah. And we've only seen really with VR, specifically VR, actually, it's been very gimmicky up till now.
Yes.
I think because of the lack of kind of interconnected data stream with 5G. And likewise, I think I'm looking forward to when it can.
And for marketing and brands, it's just going to be such a game changer. It'll be as big a revolution as mobile, because when Apple finally brings out Apple glasses, which they will do, like I say, in a 5-year time frame, they're going to do it, and then we're wearing Apple glasses, and then you walk into a store, and there's a brand, and then now what happens there? What's the possibilities for brands when you can augment what people are seeing in your store, and that is mind blowing.
Immersion element.
Yeah,
I think of so many possibilities, but. Thank you very much, Matthew. It's been a really interesting conversation, and thank you for coming on the show. We'd love to have you back in the future, talk about a few of the other subjects that we discussed earlier, and hope you have a safe trip back to China.
Thank you. Cheers. Pleasure to be on here. Yeah.